In 1954, the National Hurricane Center only predicted 1 day of tropical storm or hurricane movement. In 1961, that got expanded to 2 days. In 1964, 3 days. In 2001, it got expanded to 5 days. And we've been seeing the cone of uncertainty shrink and shrink and shrink until tomorrow, where the National Hurricane Center will be expanding the length of forecast for the first time since 2001 to a full week. This shows the feat of human technology to be able to predict our hurricanes and tropical storms in the Atlantic and East Pacific basins a full week out. We're predicting the future at a more efficient rate than ever. So let's go over the forecast from CSU and the Weather Company for 2023. The hurricane season begins today, so let's kick it off. Currently, we have no storms expected in the next 7 days, which is actually a little unusual. We have seen storms begin before the season, named storms, for much of the past decade. I think last year was the first time in like 6 or 7 years that we didn't have one, and this year is following suit. But we did have a subtropical storm form on January 16th off the coast of the Northeast as a low pressure system developed and gained subtropical characteristics. I will put in a satellite image in the B-roll here. But we don't have any expected tropical development within the next 7 days, and that is because we have an El Nino, and we'll get back to that. But let's go here to the Colorado State University forecast. You can see that we have on the left here our Colorado State University forecast for 2023, and on the right we have the average from 1991 to 2020. So we have named storms, which is just your alphabetical names that they go through the list every year. Colorado State is forecasting 13, which is below the average of 14.4, just below the average. Named storm days, which is the number of days that there is an active named storm in the Atlantic. The Colorado State University forecast is showing 55, which is below the average of 69.4. Hurricanes, Colorado State is forecasting 6, which is below the average of 7.2. Hurricane days, number of days that there's an active hurricane in the Atlantic. The Colorado State forecast is 25, which is below the average of 27. Major hurricanes, Colorado State is forecasting 2, which is below the average of 3.2. And we have major hurricane days of 5, according to the Colorado State University forecast, and that is below the average of 7.4. And accumulated cyclone energy, which is a measure of a named storm's potential for wind and storm surge destruction, defined as the sum of the square of a named storm's maximum wind speed for each 6-hour period of its existence. Only forecasting 100, which is below the average of 123. Now, the weather company is usually a little bit more bullish forecast, but they are showing 15 total named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 3 of those being Category 3 or higher. I am going with the Colorado State forecast here, maybe even a bit below that, because we have an El Nino in play here. An El Nino typically reduces the amount of tropical formation in the Atlantic Ocean because of an increase of wind shear in the atmosphere. Now, you want wind shear for tornadoes to form to get that rotation in the atmosphere, but when you're trying to get larger areas of rotation, you don't want any wind shear. And with a higher amount of wind shear, you're going to be seeing less and less storms. So we have our ENSO probability forecast from NOAA, and so is El Nino Southern Oscillation. That's either the El Nino, La Nina, or neutral. And you can see here, April, May, June, pretty much a neutral forecast there. But as we go on, May, June, July, let's call it 82% chance of an El Nino. June, July, August, close to 90, let's call it 89. July, August, September, that's the prime time of hurricane season. There's a 91% chance of an El Nino forming. And we have August, September, October, let's call it 92. September, October, November, that's around 93. And then things kind of stall out, kind of go down just a little bit as you get into the winter months. But still, this is going to be a substantial player in this hurricane season, especially if this is a strong El Nino. And we can see that here in this graph, just the same thing there, probabilistic ENSO forecast. And you can see the probabilities go up compared to the climatology, which kind of steadily grows up. You can see those probabilities in these bar charts here is a lot higher than the climatology. So we're already in El Nino watch. I expect it to be very strong this hurricane season. And you can see this is our sea surface temperature anomaly. And you can see right here, this is where we currently are. We saw that El Nino over the winter, and that was a very strong, La Nina over the winter time. But now we are starting to peak into El Nino. And last but not least, here's the model predictions. This is a spaghetti chart here, and you can see we're going to go by the statistical average. And we're basically already there. Observed, we're just about at 0. And you can see that in the future here, we're expecting a gradual increase, maybe even up to a degree Celsius higher than average. So, not looking likely that we're going to have a super active hurricane season. I think that at best we're going to be at average, but that's about it, right? But here is the changes for this year. So the peak storm surge graphics that the NWS has been using, those were experimental. But now this year, they go into full effect. So here's an example here. This isn't a real storm. You can see down here, Hurricane X. It's a mock-up. But you can see that this is the peak storm surge. So 1 to 3 feet in blue there, 2 to 4, but up to 5 feet there in yellow. So those are going to be official now. Those are part of the official forecast. We also have the same maps here for Puerto Rico. We have the big player here, extension of the tropical weather outlook to 7 days and the inclusion of an invest number on the information text graphic that the National Hurricane Center does put out. So the 2-digit number here, let me see if I can find it. There we go, AL91. So that's invest 91. So that's going to be an important player this year. That means that we could see the order that the National Hurricane Center is finding these areas of interest, and we could kind of use those a little bit more freely. And then removal of watch and warning information in the forecast advisory. So that's going to be a separate section. And, of course, the annual update to the track forecast error cone. We are going to be seeing this cone shrink again. It keeps shrinking. We are getting more and more confident that 5 days out, we're going to be pretty much, 5 days is 120 hours, so 205 miles. That's a very high confidence, and I believe that is going down by 3%. So I think that this is a great sign that we are getting much, much more accurate, especially in the Atlantic Basin. Much more accurate in terms of our forecasts. In the East Pacific, things aren't as good, but still pretty solid here. And the actual number of miles here for the forecast cone is actually less in the East Pacific. And other than that, pronunciation of storm names, we'll go through that as they get named. Social media, you can follow the National Hurricane Center on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. I even found them on Instagram. And that's about it. But this hurricane season is going to be maybe a little bit less active than some in the past. I know the 2020 and the 2017 hurricane seasons were a bit more active. This one will probably be fairly subdued. But it's definitely going to be a interesting season. Especially, let's see how these 7-day forecasts actually pan out. That's going to be what I'm going to be looking for, especially this year. How are these 7-day forecasts going to do? Comment in the comment section down below. Do you guys think that we're ready for 7-day forecasts? Do you think that we can go even further into advance with the current models that we have? Let's get a discussion going in the comments section. But that's all I have for today. Like this video if you're excited for hurricane season to finally be here. But that's all I have for today. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.